screen, or you could join Nearpod on your telephone or another device. And you can just go to nearpod.com and you type in our code, which is UYRVL. And they're typing that in now for you, I think. So UYRVL is the code that you can join our lesson. But while y'all are doing that, I'll tell you just a little bit about Nearpod. Nearpod is an interactive app where you can have live interaction with your students, but you can also do these lessons self-paced. Normally, of course, when I'm teaching my personal finance classes in person, I go through them with the live version, but I have started doing some of them live because we're doing some of our lessons synchronously and some of them asynchronously. And so I've also been doing some of the self-paced lessons. But you can use these activities for formative or for summative assessments. And there's quite a variety of activities you can use. And you'll see some of them today in our presentation. You can use video, audio, quizzes. We'll play a little game if we have time at the end. You can take your students on virtual field trips, and you can take polls of your students. So speaking of polls, we're going to try that now. And so we want to know a little bit about who's out there today. There are a lot of you. So we would like to know, are you in high school? Do you teach high school, middle school, elementary? Are you in technology? Are you an administrator? So I see some of the answers coming in. So you can poll your students with different things, and then you can share the responses. So I'll give it just a few more seconds, and then I will share. Looks like we have quite an even distribution. Here we have some high school, middle school, elementary. We have some administrators and a few technology people. So I'll share those responses from the poll. Okay. Okay, it says we've reached the maximum number on there. I've never had that happen before. My classes are a little more petite. Okay, and then we'd also like to know about what your level of confidence is with technology. So your first choice is Bill Gates has nothing on me, or you can say you are confident with technology, or you are technologically challenged. You can pick one of those. So pick an answer with that, and then we'll share the responses. Okay. Looks like most people come in they're comfortable with technology. We have a few Bill Gates among us, and then we have some who feel that they're a little technologically challenged. So hopefully we'll have something today that all of you will be able to use in these very different times that we're working in. Okay, and one more thing, this is a Collaborate board, and I want to know what you hope to learn today. What would be helpful to you? So you can type it in that box. This is like a bulletin board, and as you type, it should show your answers up here. Lots of good answers coming in. How to assess students remotely, summative assessment practices, we'll be talking about that. Better ways to assess. So lots of questions. So what are some easy assessments? If you were doing this with students, then you could have them go through, read some of the responses. They could like some of the responses. And then as the teacher, you could order those by the number of likes. And discuss some of the ones that that got the most votes on there. So it's just a fun little activity, and you can learn a little bit about what your students are thinking as you go. So I'm going to turn this over now to Beth Burau to share some of her assessment ideas. Okay, take it away, Beth.
Thanks, Kay. Today I'm going to talk to you about a few tech tools that you can use for assessments in your classroom. First and foremost, I think one of the important things to note is what we necessarily did in the classroom is not necessarily what's going to work now in remote teaching. Sometimes you all have those tried and true projects and ideas that you're like, this is like a winner. And especially in the spring, this is the one thing you were looking forward to being able to teach. So how can we go ahead and take some of those ideas in terms of your assessment and now move them into an online or digital platform? So I love this image. This image came out about 3 to 4 weeks ago. Of course, what teaching in 2020 looks like. You could replace the word teaching for assessment. And so sometimes we're going to have to piecemeal a few things together. I think one of our big takeaways is, what are the alternative assessments available to you? And trying to move away from some of the traditional methods, the multiple choice, the true false. How can you incorporate your higher order thinking skills? And now how can you put that into a digital platform? So I'm going to touch base with you on a few things. First and foremost, to let you know, I teach German as well as instructional technology. So most of my samples are for German class, but I also taught English, and all of these tools can be used regardless the content and pretty much for all grade levels. So the first one is Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is a presentational tool. This can be used for both formative and summative assessments. I've had great success in using it for an exit ticket, just so I can check for the understanding for students. Math teachers have used it to go ahead and have students explain how they would work a problem. And certainly in the language classroom, we use it for pronunciation and speaking practice. One of the things that's also great about Flipgrid, as with all the tech tools that we're going to be talking about today, is that they are vetted. You can look them up on commonsensemedia.org. They have privacy and they have safety parts to them, so you know that they're going to work well with your students. Also, whether you're an Office 365 school or whether you're a GAF Google Apps for Education school, Flipgrid's great because it's already integrated with those logins and passwords that you have for your students. So as a presentational tool, I'm sure many of you may have already heard of Flipgrid, but the first thing to know about Flipgrid is it's really good and organized, and that you create grids. So each grid for your class each grid is a class for you. So you can see here in my sample, I have some German classes up there. Recently, since we've moved to remote learning or e-learning or distance learning, I've been working with the speech teachers at our school with their classes on Flipgrid. And most recently, we've also used Flipgrid for students to create their campaign speeches for elections. Our student body still has to elect the officers for next year. So we're using it outside of the classroom as well. So each grid is a class. Within each grid, then you create a topic. Those topics are the prompts for the teachers. So those will be on the next slide. The prompts is where the teacher can go ahead and now assign different assignments for the students. And so you can see here in this example, I have ones for German, of course. So in fact, today, right now, during this webinar, I'm playing hooky, so don't tell my students. They are going ahead on an asynchronous lesson where they have to use the Flipgrid to do a reading and then respond and interpret the work in English. So what did they understand? So I'm checking for pronunciation and interpretation. So what does one assignment look like? That's going to be on the next slide. You can take a look at an example here for German 1. This happened 2 weeks ago, right before Easter, where the German 1s have been learning about clothing. And so I had them go ahead and do the speaking part of their test. This was for a summative assessment. So the students had to be able to describe using a fashion show what they were wearing and describe it using German adjectives. So they had to know their nouns, their adjectives, and certain verbs. The great thing about this is for my auditory learners and my visual learners, they could go ahead and play on the video of me explaining the assignment to them. And for those who just wanted to read it and take care of learning about what they saw with the text, they could read about the assignments as well. Then as the students the assignments, it's all curated and organized for me. So the lessons, as you can see below, there are 3 students, more turned them in, of course, but that's what it looks like from my perspective. The students will submit the videos. I don't have to search. They're all right there curated for me. So here's one example of what a student's would look like. And as the summative assessment. So this particular student used a paper doll to go ahead and have the fashion show. It may not be as easy to see in here, but those of you who are on the Nearpod, and when we give you the Nearpod code later to join later, you'll be able to watch the video of this student project. You can see that I was able to give feedback. Feedback is so important with assessment, especially now with distance learning. It's always important, but especially now, immediate and effective and good feedback. So you can see that I'm able to type in the comments feature, and I'm able to grade using a rubric within Flipgrid. And this was the summative assessment part for the speaking for the students. Another great tech tool that I would recommend so you'll be able to watch the video at another time, is with the Flipgrid. Now, starting on April 1st, they've created the screen sharing option. So now your students can become the teachers. Or for you, if you don't have an LMS, a learning management system, you can screen share and you can narrate over your Google Slides or your PowerPoints, or go through a website, and it'll curate and organize all the videos for you. But this is something I'm looking forward to using with my students in a class where they're normally giving a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. Now they'll be able to still give the presentation using Flipgrid, and they'll be able to screen share and narrate over their PowerPoint. The second tech tool that I want to talk to you about is called Book Creator. Now, Flipgrid is free. It's almost always been free. It's free now. So, but Book Creator is a freemium, meaning it's free up to a certain point, and then there's a premium tack on. So it's free up to 40 books. However, now due to COVID-19, you can also go ahead and apply and earn the collaborative feature of Book Creator. Book Creator is simply creating books. So if in your class you might have done a scrapbook project with students, or you might have done book creation, it can now be a digital one. So this just happened right before Easter as well. My German 2 class would have taken a traditional assessment where the students would have to show they know how to do narrative past tense, and that they can incorporate adjectives and then do a speaking part as well. But Book Creator totally changed the entire project. So what would have been a traditional assessment now became a project summative assessment, where students were able to speak. So they had the pronunciation down, and the students were able to create. So I could go ahead and evaluate them on their understanding with regards to the grammar topics and vocabulary from our unit. So Book Creator is a great tool that I highly recommend checking out for a summative assessment project. For those of you who have the Nearpod, you'll be able to look at a sample. I chose just to give you my sample. So if you feel like, hey, what else am I going to do during quarantine, and you want to learn some German, you'll be able to go ahead and learn a little bit of German and talking about the weather. So that's one example that I have for you. And the last thing I just want to mention to you are some 4 tried and true formative assessment tools. I'm sure most of you are familiar of at least one, if not all or some of these. GimKit's happening right now. Right now, I'm supposed to be in German too. So right now, my students are doing GimKit, and they're doing it asynchronously. So these tech tools have the capability for you, if you were doing a synchronous lesson with your student over Zoom or Google Meets or Microsoft Teams, you could play versions of these assessment tools with the whole class, or you can assign components of them asynchronously. So that's what's happening with GimKit in my class today. If you haven't had a chance to check GimKit out, I recommend it. It's another freemium account, meaning there's a free version where you can create up to 5 games. Currently, because of COVID-19, you can request to up your free kit to 10. And then there's, of course, a paid version, so you can create more. Kahoot is free, and Kahoot is well known as well. The same with quizzes. And then Quizlet has a freemium feature, meaning there's the free account and a premium account Currently now they're offering, I believe it's up to 4 months of the teacher subscription. So for those of you who wish to kind of look at your student progress when it comes to Quizlet, you're welcome to do so. Please note that all of these tools are great for formative assessments. There are some summative assessment components to them. Sometimes the integrity of that, I mean, it's totally up to you. You can try some of it. We've done some in class as well. So those are some of my 3 tech tool takeaways. And I'm going to pass it on over to Carrie, who's going to tell us more about ways you can transform your assessment practices in your classroom.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have you guys here with us today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the options that you have for maybe some project-based learning ideas. If you like to do project-based learning in your actual classroom, you can still continue and do some of that remotely as well. So before I get started, I wanted to take a quick poll and see how many people use the different software platforms that are probably the most common. So if you don't mind taking a moment, let me know if you're an Office 365 or a Google School, or maybe you have access to both, or you use something else. That would be really helpful for me when we process through the next few moments. I kind of figured most people were Google when I was setting this up, so I did use Google as my primary example. Okay, it looks like Google kind of wins, and based on the chat, I see a lot of Google in there as well. What you can do is still use those tools that are basically at play for you. So on the next slide, I have some examples of some way that you can use your Google apps and your Google options, as well as your Office 365 options, and make them collaborative for your students. And I'm sure a lot of you already do this. So just a couple of tools to keep in mind, that even when you're using and having the students do a Google slide presentation, or maybe you have them brainstorming in a Google Doc, you can turn that Google Doc into a discussion board of sorts. My suggestion for you is to make sure that you're creating the assignment that you are making, even if it's a blank Google slide that you push out to your students, because you as the author can then see who contributed what. So I know sometimes how it gets for students where one student's not contributing as well as others, or maybe isn't pulling their weight. You as the instructor who created the actual document can then see who has actually contributed, so that you know that firsthand. When the students create this on their own, you can't always tell that. So make sure that whether you're using Office 365 and they have to sign in, or Google and they have to sign in there as well, and if you own the actual document, you will have a lot of little ease there in grading to make sure that you've actually seen who has done what. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. These are great tools. They're very, very, very similar. And so they really kind of work the same way. So if you have access to both, or you prefer one over the other, I think you'll find that they're both very similar. So on the next slide, I did give you an example of how I used a Google spreadsheet in my actual class. My lesson that I had for them for this particular chapter was an interactive project that they were supposed to work on in class together. And I typically just randomly assign their topics. And so I just simply put up a Google spreadsheet for them, gave them the link, have them log in. They went in, and instead for this particular project, they were able to choose their topic, and I gave them all the information they needed. So then they went in, they built their project, and we presented live on Zoom, and it worked out really well. I think that they enjoyed it, and they liked being able to obviously continue right along with what we were already supposed to do in class. I had told them about this project early on, so they were actually really excited about it, and being able to take that and figure out how to transition that over to remote learning was a challenge, but it certainly worked out really well. Another thing that you might want to do with your students, which I've kind of discussed on the next slide, and I know some of you may have already mentioned it in the chat, you can turn your Google Forms or your Microsoft Forms as well into actual quizzes. So if you don't have an LMS, or you don't have access to some sort of quiz tool, or you don't want to go out and learn a new quiz application, you can take your normal classroom instruction and put it simply in a Google form and turn it over into a quiz. I've given you some shortcut examples here on this slide, but on the next slide, If you're following along as a student in the Nearpod, you can actually see a blue square there that says click here to open the web page, and it'll take you to the web page in the Google Help section that shows you exactly step-by-step how to create that. And in case you also are interested in doing something a little different, you can use the quiz format in Google Forms and turn it into a breakout, a digital breakout. I like to do a breakout with my students in class, and so I was able to turn it into a digital breakout for them. I could basically you make it a quiz. You make your digital breakout a quiz, you insert some photos. I was able to send them the clues that they needed, and they were able to work on this at home instead of doing it in class like we normally would. They had a lot of fun with it. It was a little bit different, and it helped them kind of think outside the box and to be able to think creatively and to put, still staying on task, still learning the topics that you wanted them to do, but making sure that they could also go in and apply that information and apply that knowledge. And I think they really enjoyed the digital breakout as well. And on the next slide, it's another live link to a step-by-step process of exactly how you would create a digital breakout. That could be a webinar in and of itself, but this is the actual documentation, and this person has a really, really good step-by-step tutorial, so I'm promoting him and exactly how he did it. That's the one I used, and he even gives you sample forms that you can copy and download and just make your own, so they're really, really nice. But the last little section that I wanted to talk to you about and maybe introduce to you guys as a new site that maybe you're unfamiliar with. I know a lot of these may be familiar options for you, but Wakelet is a new source that I came across kind of on my own, along with my cohorts here. They actually were the ones who brought it up to me, and I just kind of took the ball and ran with it and learned a little bit more about it. Wakelet was first originally started as a social media platform, and I think it can still be used that way as well. However, they do have a private option. So you can go in as an instructor and you can take Wakelet and make a private collection or a private board, and you can share that with your classroom. They actually have developed their own education side to Wakelet, and they have an entire resource book and guidebook for you to learn how to use Wakelet in your classroom as an educator. So it's a really, really, really nice option for you if you like to do that and you want to perhaps make a digital bulletin board for your students. You can use this on the elementary level all the way up through the high school level. It can be collaborative, or it can simply be informative. And again, you can make these unlisted and private so that they're not out there for the world to see. So if you are making it collaborative for your students and you want them to post to it or to contribute to it, then it is done with privacy in mind. So if they're sharing photos with you and things along that nature, then they are private. So that's kind of nice. And like I said, you can use it as a resource board, a bulletin board, a collaborative board for fellow teachers, for people perhaps of the same grade level. And from that perspective, almost like its own little LMS with your maybe co-teachers. I used it particularly as a visual discussion board. And so what I did with my students is I posed some questions on a Wakelet that I created, and I gave them instructions, and I sent them the links so that they could go in and collaborate. And then what they did is they would write their opinion to the topic that I posed, and I asked them to support that with documentation that they found on the web. And they were able to easily drag and drop in their supporting documentation. They could discuss with each other, they could collaborate together, and they could answer each other. And it was completely opinion based. So it was really nice to see that they could actually go out and support their opinions. And so it was really nice, and they really enjoyed it. And I would definitely recommend and use it again. On the next slide, I've given you a link to the Wakelet's education side, and you can see there, if you click the blue bar, if you're following as a student in the Nearpod, it will take you straight to their website where you can sign up as an educator, and they have an educator resource book that you can see to go in and see what all they have to do for you and what you can do. And then I've also given you a couple of visual takeaways. So here's an example of maybe what a Wakelet could look like. This particular person that I decided to screenshot for you, I wanted you to see how he had his little tiles along the bottom. So he has, when you go into his site about remote learning, he has listed a whole collection of free technology tools that you could use, and then given you tutorials on how to use them. And then he's also gone back and given you actually some classes that he has put some like different things that you could learn online in general. So it was a really nice little collection there. I didn't check them all out, but I just wanted you to have a nice little visual there. But Wakelet has kind of done this for you. And so I've given you a link to Wakelet's very own remote learning Wakelet that they created. And that's on the next slide. And she'll show you that. And again, you can click to download this and open it. And what they have done is they have created collections. And in each of those collections on this particular Wakelet post are tutorials on how to use those topics. And you will find one on Nearpod, you will find one on Flipgrid, you will find, of course, the first one on there is how to use Wakelet. And they have given you tutorials and suggestions all along the way. There are also open source Wakelets where you can go in and search the open source ones and find out what other people are doing and how they're using it. So it's a really, really nice for the students to be able to see this and use it. And again, it can be collaborative or it can be just informative. So it is 100% your choice, and you can definitely do it both ways. But my students really enjoyed Wakelet, so I hope that maybe you guys will give that one a try. And so now I want to turn it back over to Kay Gentsch, and she'll show you a few more features of Nearpod and some of the ways you can use.
Okay, we are going to play a little game that the students seemingly of all ages enjoy. And so you're going to pick your character. We're going to ask you just a few simple questions just for fun. The questions, the score is based, oh, here are a lot of characters. The score is based on your time and of course, accuracy in getting these questions right. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. I know everyone didn't get in and I'm sorry, but hopefully you'll get an idea of what you can do with this. It's a question about Flipgrid. Okay, we have some winners coming in. I'm going to go ahead and show the student name so we can see. Oh, sorry, that messed it up. I am so sorry. Okay, we're real quick. Here we go. There we go. So it looks like Julie's in the lead, followed by Matt and Jared. Okay. Okay, so we have Julie, Patrice, and Jenna, and Dale. And here comes our third question. Question about Wakelet. See if Julie holds on to her lead. Looks like Julie's got it going on. She's still number one, Patrice and Jenna. And one more question. Oh, Dale's moved up. Last question about Kahoot, Quizlet, Quizzes, and Gimkit. Okay, and here are our leaders. We have Julie, Patrice, Dale, and Jeff. Congratulations. If I had you in class, I'd give you a small treat. But it's just a fun thing you can do. Okay, one more question on Nearpod, one more poll. If you would answer this, you're interested in trying the following. So you can choose one of these you've heard about today: Book Creator, Wakelet, Nearpod, Flipgrid. Choose one, or you can choose all of the above. few more seconds. Okay, we have a lot of all of the above. Okay, I will share our results on this. But all of the above got the most responses, Nearpod. Okay, great. Okay, now I am going to turn it over to Rachele Piazza, and she's going to share a little bit about what we've learned through this process over the last few weeks. Here you go.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. I know that you've learned and heard a lot of tech tools and assessments. So now I'm going to kind of turn to a different direction and talk to you about what we've learned on our campus. We are Catholic high school, over 1,000 co-ed students. We are a one-to-one school. So what are the challenges? What are the things we've had to adjust to and support our teachers? So first thing is, our biggest challenge in the beginning was probably getting feedback from our families and our teachers on how things were going. It was a huge change in a short amount of time. So we had to be able to solicit feedback in a way where we're not at school to easily get that feedback. So some of the things we did is our teachers do daily attendance, and with that they have check-ins. Sometimes it's well-being checks, seeing how the kids are doing, what can the teacher do to support them. And so that really helps the teacher right then in real time get information from their students. We've had people give phone calls to families, emails. We also have a house system at Bishop Lynch High School, and that's a whole webinar on itself, but just so you know that our house system has played a huge part in also making sure our students are doing well, our families are doing well, and getting feedback. The new feedback tool that we started a couple of weeks ago was a feedback form, e-learning feedback form. And that form is very short. It has 2 questions, and it goes out every week on Tuesday. And so actually I received the responses to those questions, or I received the answers to those questions, and I review it. I send it to the appropriate department. I also look for themes from the student feedback to see if, maybe we can make some changes or adjustments based on the themes that I'm seeing in the feedback. The 2 questions that we put on our feedback form is the e-learning process meeting your academic needs? And then the second question is, what changes could Bishop Lynch High School do to make your e-learning more effective? And I get a wide range of responses, but I will say that the feedback has greatly helped us reevaluate our assessment strategies and our tools for student success. So even though the feedback part is not directly related to assessment, it is helping us better our assessment and maybe make some changes as we go along these weeks. Now, providing assessment to our students. So feedback from teachers early on in the process was that assessment feedback was taking a very long time. Normally you get to have real time to provide that feedback, or maybe the way students are uploading their answers or their solutions or labs or whatever it might be taking the teacher a long time to get back to the student and provide feedback. So some ways that you can adjust that and make it unique to the virtual e-learning process, less is more. So think of more about quality over quantity. You do not have to assess everything you would have in a traditional classroom setting. So think about what is most important and focus on those topics. We also ask that you leverage student support and engagement and rely on them to give feedback. Have them do self-reflections, work with each other on a Zoom call or submitting flip grids or sort of tools will help them also be part of the assessment process. So those things to think about when a teacher might be struggling with providing quality feedback in a timely manner is how can you reevaluate the way the feedback is provided. Also, through the process, now I know I talked about the feedback form that we do at Bishop Lynch, but through that process, we have had to make some adjustments and we've had to grow in this e-learning time. So at Bishop Lynch, we focus every year on goal setting, and we actually tell our teachers, to focus on one thing. What is the one thing they want to focus on this year? And that idea came from the Mind Steps conference, and they actually use the Danielson framework for teaching and learning, and so do we for our teacher evaluation system. And so we also took that idea and put it in our e-learning process, where we focus on one thing that you can do tech-wise in your class. Do not try to, all these tools you've learned today, all these things maybe you've seen, and maybe some you already know, focus on just one. What is the one thing you want to learn more about? What's the one thing you want to implement in your classroom or show your students? Doing too much can be way overwhelming for you and for the student. And so just focus on that one thing, and that will help with the tech tools that you've learned today. With that, it's important that we not just take the feedback and read it and evaluate it, but what do we do with that now? How do we make changes? It's okay to make changes even after a few weeks of the e-learning process. Don't feel like you cannot make those adjustments. It's very important that the families know that you are listening and that you're there to help make those adjustments. Our teachers have gained more confidence, even though it was an adjustment period. They have gained more confidence in technology. We are a one-to-one school, but they were forced to be tech savvy or learn something new. And so that's a huge positive. I feel like in this situation that we will see more next year or in the traditional classroom setting, that our teachers are more comfortable with trying something new in the technology world. So we took our e-learning themes and we looked, we get feedback. I get feedback from the e-learning forum every week. And so the themes that we learned for the first 3 weeks, we made some adjustments to the guidelines. And some of those things are consistency. Our school is a block schedule, and our teachers or our students might have 8 different teachers. Well, those teachers might have had 8 different deadlines or times to turn in assignments. So we've asked that the process is all consistent, like the assignment due dates are consistent so that the students can stay on top of their work and when it is due. The length of time for homework, we are asking our teachers to design assessments so that they only take 30 minutes. So this is outside of the classroom time. We have a half-day schedule for our e-learning, and I'm going to let Miss Randy Becker actually talk more about that. But we ask that outside of the classroom time, that the assessments are only 30 minutes or less. Organization, our LMS system, we use Blackboard, and we ask that our teachers use the calendar for due dates. They have the content folder to post their agendas for the week, and everything is in a centralized location. That's very important for our students to be successful. Flexibility is huge. We have to be flexible with ourselves, and we have to be flexible with our students. So that is something we just remind constantly, is flexibility with ourselves as well and with our students. Being present. Our families have really, really enjoyed the Zoom classes where our teacher is present. And so we have asked that that is taking place more often because the students have, they love seeing their teacher, they love seeing their classmates, even if it's in an academic setting. They really have enjoyed the live interaction with their teachers. the last thing we adjusted, and actually more or less just made sure that it was being taken care of, is our learning difference students. So we do have students with documented learning differences who get extended time on assessments. And so we wanted to make sure that those students were still taken care of during this process and still receiving the extended time accommodations. So that is huge. Is, you know, just because they're at home doesn't mean it changes the needs of our students, and especially our students with learning differences, that they are also receiving their accommodations. That is all I have about what we've learned. And our biggest challenges is just growing and being open to that and learning new things. But our faculty has done an excellent job, and I'm very proud of them for all that they've done for our family. So Mr. Becker, you are next to talk about, sum up our presentation for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachele. And before I begin, I just want to thank everyone, number one, for your participation in our webinar today, and number two, for all of our participants from Bishop Lynch High School. As you can see, my job is to kind of put a framework around what you just heard. We've been very fortunate at Bishop Lynch High School to have such a wealth of knowledgeable people to help us create this structure. And those of you that have been put in this situation without having the background or the framework, I just want to kind of give you some background information to help you understand that you can move from here to become a school that has distance and e-learning capability. We were fortunate enough to go all the way back to 2011 when we began the process of moving to a one-to-one school. We put together a committee to go out to neighboring schools that had already adopted a one-to-one learning platform. So we started there deciding what was the best platform for us to use as a school. We, with that committee, decided that it was going to be a bring your own device platform using a laptop. A lot of schools have used Chromebook or they have adopted iPad. For us, we just found that it was better to be a bring your own device laptop school. And so we started there back in 2011. From there, it evolved into the creation of our I-team that you saw the presentation from, which that has been our largest driving force and the reason why I believe we've been successful in this changing environment. These ladies have done a phenomenal job of putting together resources for our teachers to use, being there for our teachers to help them become more comfortable with the digital delivery of their content in the classroom, which then allowed us to transition the digital delivery to our students in this current environment. Probably the next biggest advancement that we chose, if any of you are thinking about moving in this direction in a more permanent basis, is the fact that you heard we are a Blackboard school. We chose to use Blackboard as our platform, and that was the process I think that really kicked everything off. And from that use of Blackboard, we were able to transition away from having to use snow days in our calendar, and we went to we went to something called an E-Day. E-Day was an asynchronous learning environment that we were able to create so that if we had a snow day, teachers were prepared, they could put lessons together, put them on Blackboard, and then have dialogue with their students turn in assignments, and we were able to kind of move forward with our schedule. You heard it said that we are a block schedule school, and so as you know, those of you who are block schedule, A day, B day is such an environment that teachers need to keep that rolling along, and so the E-Day platform worked out great for us. So from there, we realized that this possibility of working from home was going to become a more reality. And so the weeks leading up to spring break, we gathered up the I-team. Rachele and I with Dr. Riley sat down to talk about what can we do next? What can we do to make this platform work for all teachers? And so that's kind of how we evolved into the system where we are today. As Rachele pointed out, I think the biggest piece of this transition for us was the feedback platform that we put together. And Dr. Riley, you've seen in the chat that he has put out there, the biggest transition that he gave to us is that as a school, we've transitioned to such a growth mindset. We are fortunate enough that we are a collaborative environment. We all are there to support one another, and we want to collaborate in the most effective ways to help our students learn. And the biggest thing that we have put in place is the idea of growth mindset. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to challenge yourself as a teacher, to challenge your students, and then assess what went on to see what could I do differently? What's the one thing, you've heard the word one thing, the phrase, and that's what we believe in. What's the one thing we could do differently to reassess again and to make this a success? And I think that's probably the biggest reason why I believe that we are comfortable with what we're doing. We are pleased with our success so far, and we know that we can see this through as the coming weeks go. And when we're ready to get back in school, trust me, we're all ready to get there. But for right now, we're going to continue to learn from our feedback, to learn from each other, to reassess, and to keep moving down that road of growth mindsets. As Rachele did mention too, I think the other biggest piece of what's made us successful in this transition into e-learning was we took our 90-minute classes and went down to our half-day schedule, which are 50-minute classes. That in itself gave us a framework for teachers to be able to create Zoom classroom settings, if that is something they felt comfortable with. And then we gave the option of then also having a study period after that. So we framed our school day around the half day of classes, which ended at noon. We put a lunch period in there. We put a mentor time, as Rachele mentioned, for our house system to have some meetings. And then we went ahead and added in a 2.5-hour time frame there for students to study and for teachers to have office hours. So our main driving force is to try to create a school day that mirrored electronically what we did in person. And so those are some of the things I think that has helped us become more comfortable and more successful in this e-learning environment. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to our principal, Dr. Riley, to kind of wrap everything up. Thank you.
One of the things that Mr. Becker emphasized that was very useful for continuing our extended e-learning process was having a structure that supports this process. You know, it's easy to get into the weeds when we're just trying to handle the day-to-day. But I think also spending some time thinking about how you're going to support the process is an important part of keeping this moving forward. So I appreciate that final comment, Mr. Becker. Well, we have about 9 minutes left, and we'd like to leave a little time to respond to some questions. And so I'm not sure if the NCEA moderator wants to curate those questions or how he would like to proceed with that.
Yes, so there are some questions in the Q&A, and I've noticed that you all have been answering them. A lot of the questions that have been coming in through the chat as the session has gone on. So some of the things we have in the Q&A are your schools giving actual grades, or is it pass-fail, or do you just collect them? In other words, compassionate grading.
We are giving actual grades still. We haven't gone to the pass-fail. We're still doing traditional grading.
Yeah, we because we already had an E-Day process in place, it wasn't a huge pivot for us to go from E-Day to extended e-learning. And so our students were already familiar with how to do that. So we are still getting grades. We still do have some decisions to make, however. And part of that is based on what our local decisions are going to be. And when I say local, I mean by our government officials. We don't know for sure about how we are going to administer final exams. And also we need to have a conversation about the weighting of each of the quarters in the midst of that discussion. So that's our next major decision. But we are still giving actual numeric grades. And Randy and Rachele, I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
No, I would echo what Dr. Riley said. The biggest thing I think that we've transitioned into is probably asking teachers to have the flexibility, because we know that all students are in a different situation at home. And so teachers have been flexible, but yet they're still requiring their students to turn in the assignments with the flexibility, with timeframes and so forth.
Yes, and we also we have to follow what our accreditation is allowing, the Diocese of Dallas. So they have not made any changes to the grading right now. So we cannot as well until more conversations are had. So
I'd like to answer a question from David. He asked if our half-day classes throughout the year are e-learning days. Some of them are, and some of them are not. We do have some half-day classes that are just a traditional classroom setting. Students come to class. We just have shortened classes, and they get out at noon. We do have 2 other days that we do designate as E-days, and those are on the calendar. And the reason we have those is so that we can have our parent-teacher conferences. So what we were able to do with that is we run concurrently an E-day with conferences, so students are still able to get their learning in. And the E-day, traditionally our E-day classes have been asynchronous. But with all the things that we've been learning recently with extended e-learning, that may change for us. That may be one of the things that's born out of this new situation is a transition to more synchronous learning, even on our E-days.
I saw a question about math. Mary Jo asked, how do I find an assessment platform for math? And I would like Beth to confirm, but I personally feel like Flipgrid is a perfect opportunity for math assessments because the student can work the problems on paper and pencil while they're videoing and submit it in Flipgrid. And so you can see the student working and explaining the problem to you as though you were there with them. So that would be my suggestion about math, a tech tool to use if you want to see it in person, see who's doing the work, so you can assess that, and having them explain it as well verbally and not just write it down. Flipgrid would be a perfect platform for that type of assessment.
Yeah, I worked with one of the math teachers probably our first week into e-learning, and how she wanted to differentiate and have some of her traditional like multiple choice, but she wanted proof that the kids were actually doing the work, and so she was going to have them do 2 problems on Flipgrid so she could watch them make sure they did the steps. So that worked well.
I saw a number of questions in the chat about arts classes, I guess music and art and dance, and is there any plan, or have you been working with those directly at your school?
I can speak to that too, as I have a student I have students at our actual school, and one is actually taking art class this semester. And so he's having to do his online, and he is loving it. Our art teacher is, or one of them is, I'm sure all of them are, but he's only in one. But that particular teacher is doing an amazing job. He has completely revamped what he was planning to do, and has actually taken into consideration that the students have limited resources at home and access to the art supplies. And he's making assignments based on like recycling materials that they have in the house, what they have access to, and having them build a sculpture and taking pictures with their phones and submitting things. He's been doing a great job. I also happen to coach the dance team, and I work really closely with our dance teacher. And so she is having her students they're using Flipgrid, they're using Zoom, and she is giving them assignments and lessons that they can do to continue having their class period and learning material and going over it and working that way. So I think that our art teachers are doing a fantastic job, and I know our students are really, really enjoying it. And just from personal experience, seeing how flexible our teachers are and being able to come up with really creative ways and knowing that their students don't always have the access that they might have had at school. So they're doing great.
Somebody asked if our art teachers are using Zoom or videos. The answer is both. So our sculpture teacher is actually, he scaffolded his e-learning. Each week he kind of added to it a little bit. And he is doing a video. He did a YouTube video created with steps and process for the assignment. But each week it started out slow, and then he gradually just scaffolded them up to a bigger and bigger presentation or outcome. And it was very neat to see how he used what's in nature at home to complete the sculpture assignment. So he does a video, but some do Zoom as well. We don't require our teachers to do Zoom. We allow them to choose between synchronous and asynchronous learning, but the families have seemed very positive with the synchronous learning and seeing their teacher at least once a week. We're asking that teachers make some personal connection with their classes at least once a week, because we've seen the positive feedback from the feedback form on those who are doing synchronous learning, but it's not a requirement.
And I was just going to add in real quick, because I saw questions about band. Our band teacher has been loving it because he's been able to do group Zooms, and then he's also been able to do individual practice sessions in Zoom. So it's added to his program, believe it or not, by not having the students all there, because he gets multiple class periods now.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Chad, and the entire panel for everything you've shared with us. For those in the audience, please fill out the survey to get your certificate of attendance, and you can look for this session on demand in a couple of days on the attendee site. Enjoy the rest of your NCA virtual experience. Have a great day.
Thank you all for participating.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.